Thank you, Kalani. And to echo what Kalani said, thanks to each of you for being here. We understand your time is precious, and we understand, as the airlines say, you had many other options when traveling here today. So we thank you for selecting this session. To give you a little background, the root of this session was based in the fact that this is the centennial year of AGU, and one of the centennial themes was storytelling. And Kalani, Bill, and I have been working together over the past several years to elevate the voice of Native science, to lift and make a presence for the voice of Native science here at AGU and at other conferences. And so we were very excited when storytelling was one of the themes, as that is an essential element in Native science. It is Native science to many extents. So we've carefully selected several speakers that you will hear from, including Kalani and Bill, and we'll be letting each one of those speakers present to you information about storytelling and how it's a part of their work. And then we have intentionally left a large part of the session, about the entire second hour, for discussion among the group. So unlike almost every other AGU session you will go to, where you might get a question in, we're hoping for very rich dialogue with all of you after the presentation. So come closer, yes. So take a minute and move towards the front of the room, please. Thank you, Kalani.
We already know what these guys think. We want to know what you guys think.
Yeah, aloha mai kako, this is Bill Thomas. And as you move in, just want to remind you, this is about storytelling, so hopefully it will be short on PowerPoints and long on words, respectful words, good words. But at the end of our very short sort of intros and presentations, as Bonnie said, the real value is in the discussion, it's in the dialogue. Quite often we come to meetings and it's one way. People are up here speaking, and we get a chance maybe to ask questions in the last 5 or 10 minutes, maybe. And often we walk away and there's sort of just something that you were missing. Hopefully this will fill a little bit of it. We don't have a whole lot of time. It's longer than most sessions, but we do have time, and we're building in time to have that two-way dialogue where we could share, information and everything. Bonnie had mentioned the speakers, and I have to be transparent with you. We had a couple that had to drop out. Leslie L. Kea, who is one of our presenters. I'll read something from her because she had helped me prepare some notes for her. She had to defend her dissertation yesterday.
Who doesn't know that, right? Who doesn't know that? The committee dropped it on her. She was like, "Damn, girl, go."
I was on the plane on Sunday morning. And Leslie's not here. What's happening?
He's calling me from the plane.
I land, I get a long email where her committee, one member of the committee said, "You need to defend on Tuesday. We know you're going to this meeting, but you got to defend on Tuesday or not at all." So she said, "Bill, what do you think?" I go,
girls,
we know what's
tell
most
me which
important.
girls don't know that. Don't know how they play that game. So I told her, go.
I can report that she is actually very successful in her defense. So now we have a Dr. Leslie Aokea, and she sends her regrets.
Am I being too honest?
But also mahalo her, thanks for understanding. The other is Puakea Nogelmeyer, who we're really excited about having, but he's not here either. He translates a lot of documents. We're going to have a video of him sort of summarizing what he does and what we're looking forward to. And Kalani is the one who'll sort of take it from there. But his funders for his project moved it 2 weeks up. All of his paperwork needs to be in today. So I got a call on Friday afternoon. I got back from Boulder Friday afternoon, and he goes, "Bill, guess what?" So Friday morning, I'm with my iPhone taking a video of him. That's what you're going to see of that intro.
It's probably for the best when Puakea starts telling stories. Could be 2 hours before anybody gets a word in edgewise.
And Kalani can be 5, by the way. But anyway, we're really pleased to have you here, and pleased to have everybody here. You've met Bonnie, and I would like everybody to take a chance to introduce themselves. You have the choice. If you leave it up to me, you never know what you're going to get. Right?
Take them up on it.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start this off, if I can, just because they're not here. See if I can figure this out. Where are we? Let's see if you.
Gotta go to Bonnie's file
Oh, there you go.
for Poor Cares video. Open with.
No wonder. It says this presentation is on the Mac.
Yeah,
That's,
they're all on the Mac. Sorry, we're badly behaved on the PC.
Because Dan.
I know, I know.
first.
You know, in
So we have,
1987, I spent
as Bill said,
$5,000 to
we are
get
trying
2
to-
megabytes of RAM.
We're trying
Two.
to really use this time for words, and our first speaker actually is Dan, and he does not have a PowerPoint. So if you'll ignore the
Dan?
distracting screen over there while we find the PowerPoints, we're going to move forward and let Dan do his presentation. So you can stay there, come here, whichever you prefer.
I'll come up here.
Yep, I think that would be great.
O, kia ora mai tātou, ngā mihi o te iahia i kia o ata kia koutou katoa kua taimai. Ka taka he mihi kia koe kalani mō tō whakatuwhara tia tēnei hui, tēnei ata, nā te mea, tēnei te mihi nui kia koe. Kia koutou katoa kua taimai. Ki te rongo i ngā kōrero i ngā pūrākau o ngā tangata whenua o te ao whānui, nau mai haere mai. Ka tika he mihi hoki ki ngā mana whenua tēnei rohe, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka tuau i te wā pauri, nā te mea, ka puta te ahua o te whakaari kei whakatāne kei te moana nui a toi, kei Aotearoa. E mate ngā tangata kei reira, ka tika he mihi ki ngā whānau pani kei reira, ngā mihi aroha, ngā mihi tautoko, i rungi te ahua o tēnei pauri. Ko waio, he mokopuna tēnei o Ngāti Manipoto o Waikato Tainui o Ngāti Whanaunga hoki. Ko ōwhawhe e te maunga, ko toki kapu te marae, ko Waitomo te awa, ko Ngāti Manipoto te iwi. Ko au he huri o Hoturo, ko Tamati Kapua, ko Tia, ko Dan Hikuroa toko ingoa. And most of the rest of the presentation will be in a language that most of you will understand. But in this session, it was fitting that I introduced myself in the way that my ancestors would introduce themselves. And so first I acknowledged Kalani for opening our session this morning. And then I acknowledged you all who have come along to listen to some of the stories. I think that's the word I used. Then I just acknowledged the home people from here. I actually don't know who they are, and I'm embarrassed to say that. But just acknowledged the native peoples from here. Then I just put out a mihi. Some of you will know that Whakaari, White Island, an active volcano in the Bay of Plenty of New Zealand, erupted last week, and sadly some lives were lost during that event. And I just sent out messages of love and support to the people back home there. I understand even that a young woman from San Francisco may be among those who were sadly caught up in this eruption. And it's also fitting and consistent with the tikanga, with the protocols and practices of my people.
Yeah.
Then I gave what we'd call at home a pepeha. I introduced myself, and I started with my mountain, I started with my river, I started with my marae. Maybe a longhouse might be a similar equivalent for this part of the US. I spoke about my tribe. I spoke about my ancestors that came down on the waka, on the canoes from Hawaii to Aotearoa. And then I spoke about me. Now what's really important there is that I was giving you all a sense of who I am. Now I'm the individual here. I have the voice. I have agency today, but I'm nothing without all of those things. And they existed before me, and they will exist after I'm gone, and it's just my responsibility to uphold the mana, to uphold the charisma and the authority and the respect of my people while I'm here on this earth. Because that's the way that we think in our Māori, and I believe a Polynesian, and probably even an Indigenous approach, is that it's a relational way of knowing and being in the world. So, Now I will jump into my story. As a child, we loved to go swim in the river. And so I'll just recount to you a story that actually is a real story from my life. Mum, can we go swim in the river? Yes, yes. Okay, can I take my brothers and my cousins? Yes, yes. And then Dad shouts up, beware of that taniwha in the corner, you boys. Oh, okay, yep. We'll keep an eye out for the taniwha. We went down to the river. Now, the taniwha lived in the corner. There was a couple of corners of the river. And we'd never seen the taniwha, but we knew all about it. It was a mythical water being that if you got too close to the corner, it would devour you. It would do all sorts of unheard of and unholy things to you. And so you can imagine 5, me and my brother and my 3 cousins, young boys aged between 7 and 10, going down the river on our own. We were always up to try and pushing boundaries, always trying to one-up one another. There was a lot of machismo in this group. But not once did we dare venture close to the lair of the taniwha for fear of it taking us in its grasp and for us to be never seen again. I'll fast forward now to a more recent event where the New Zealand Transport Authority were looking to build a freeway. And it was alongside quite a significant river, in fact the river I mentioned earlier on, the Waikato River. And they had all the engineers and they plotted out a course, and some of the local people went up to the engineers and said, oh, we wouldn't put your motorway through there, you might call it a freeway in America. Oh, why is that? The engineer said. Oh, that's the lair of Karutahi, the taniwha, and he has a few layers up and down the river here. And the first I heard about it was because there was a big article in one of the national newspapers. Mythical creature costs taxpayers millions of dollars. And as it transpired, the home people had said to the authorities, you know, we don't think you should put your motorway, that's where the taniwha lives. I'm still interested to know why the decision makers listened to that kōrero, or listened to that story, and they said it was a taniwha that lived there. And they rerouted the freeway, not by much, maybe by a few hundred metres or so. And, you know, sure, it would have added additional costs to the project, but not all that much. 14 months after that freeway had finished completion, a massive flood came in and just inundated the area where the original route of the freeway was supposed to go. And home people says, see, karutahi. And the engineer said, why didn't you tell us you meant it was a flood risk? And they said, that's the way you see it. That's a manifestation of karutahi to us. That's how we understand it. And so I'm still waiting for the headline that says, mythical creature saves taxpayer millions of dollars. And so for us in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the taniwha is your kaitiaki, is your guardian. And I never understood that as that 10-year-old boy wanting to take my brothers and cousins to the river. But it dawned upon me later in life, maybe in my mid-20s, where we knew about the taniwha, we didn't go to that corner of the river, we stayed safe. And a kaitiaki is your guardian. And so even though a taniwha is associated with risk and danger and beware, if you acknowledge it's there, if you acknowledge the way it manifests itself and take steps accordingly, you could see that as disaster risk reduction. You could see that as involved in a decision-making process, to try and use the language of policy. And so this taniwha is actually an explanation for phenomena that we see in the landscapes around us, but codified in a way that made sense to our worldview. And for Māori, taniwha are real. Now I can tell you, as that 10-year-old boy, if my parents had said to me, you boys don't swim in the corner of the river, it's dangerous. How many of you as 10-year-old children would have said, I'm trying to outdo my brothers and cousins, I'm going to get as close to that corner as I can. But when the taniwha was there, we didn't even come close. And so maybe in closing, I'd just like to say that the taniwha is a codified form of knowledge born from centuries of observations of natural phenomena in the environment, and it was a way of keeping us safe. And one of the most exciting things that we have in Aotearoa, New Zealand right now, this is a shameless plug for our session tomorrow, is that our Environmental Protection Authority, we have one of those as well, is exploring how we can use things like taniwha in government-level decision-making processes.
Ew.
So, kia ora mai tātou katoa. That's me for this morning.
Mahalo, mahalo.
Thank you, Dan. First, for that wonderful story and those great examples and those teachings, and also for traveling here from New Zealand, for having to deal with no hotel last night, for having to overcome obstacles and still moving forward and getting yourself here. Thank you.
Kia ora, Tony.
Next, we'll have Elena Sparrow, and I think I have her presentation here. Yep, I got it. Yeah. Oh, right. Sorry, should wear my glasses.
And I'm just going to wave to you now before I disappear behind the tall column.
I was gonna say, it's like,
But I
Oh, oh, yeah.
right.
I can advance it for you.
It's okay.
Okay.
Oh, I think. Oh, still. Yeah. Great. So, I am Elena Sparrow. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat.
magandang umaga.
I am originally from the Philippines and now in the subarctic Arctic in Alaska, from the International Arctic Research Center at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors, and Katy Spellman is here, but Melinda Chase, who's key in this work that we're doing, and Jessica Brunazzini are not here, but they also have contributed a lot. And so we start as the other panelists would actually share with you too, on honoring, recognizing that there are diverse knowledge systems that it would be advantageous to use and to braid in our work. So we're continuing this important work of braiding Indigenous and Western science, building on prior work. So you can see the AINE, or the Association of Interior Native Education camps, cultural camps that they held with elders and with educators, with community members, and then the reaching communities involved in climate change, Science of the Land camp. And then on the other side is the global learning and observations to benefit the environment. It's a science and education program, and then using it on the observing locally, connecting globally in the project that we currently have, which is Arctic and Earth Science, which is a STEM learning and braiding Indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge and ways of doing with action. So we came up with this model, the Arctic, which is again modified from a previous model from our prior work. And so it's generational, intercultural, and actionable STEM learning. And so some of you are educators would recognize the learning cycle model. And what we have added to this is the learning and listening from elders and long-term community members, as well as scientists, about the science and impacts of climate change. And so partnering with Indigenous collaborators is key. And this shows Melinda Chase, and then Marie Dayton Melinda leads the Association of Interior Native Educators, and Marie Dayton is an elder and who is on a board member, and Nicole James, who is the office manager. And they all, contribute so much to our work. And so an example in the Science of the Land is increased clear articulation of an example of braiding Indigenous and Western knowledge in their community inquiry. And a quote from one of the participants was that elders are the best asset, and connecting them to youth through climate change-related interviews is a win-win. And so the youth, because the elders wanted it to be intergenerational, the camp consisted of elders, community members, educators, hunters and gatherers, but we also had youth, because that's what the elders wanted. And the youth as well as the adults were very thirsty for the knowledge that that the elders shared about how they have continued to adapt to changes in the environment, and were very hopeful in their approach. They said, we have done this for centuries, we will continue to do this. And so the youth were very much motivated about, what to do. And then in the Arctic and Earth Science STEM integrating GLOBE and NASA, an example, and this is just one example because there are several communities that are doing this. During our training, professional development workshops, we invite not only educators, but also community members and youth leaders to engage the youth in the community. And so this is an example from Quitlook, Alaska. This 4 Alaska Native students took stories from elders to heart, and and also from their observations and measurements, they were very concerned about the erosion that was happening in their villages. And so they conducted a climate change project and also a stewardship project. And they presented their findings to the community and an international conference. And they did it both ways. The way that their elders have taught them, a story, and they did the story in song and dance form. So they presented at the oral science session, but also in the cultural night, where they shared their project as a story and a song and a dance, including their elder, who is Elder Pauline Morris, who is at the extreme left on the top picture. And so they also went to the tribal council and recommended ways to reduce erosion. From their own observations and measurements, they said it would be really good to have a no-wake zone on the river by the village, to change the anchoring system instead of on the ground and on the soil, to have one that is sturdy and will not cause erosion, and also to plant more vegetation along the river, because they noted that where there was vegetation, there was less erosion. And so for both projects, the Reaching Arctic Communities Facing Climate Change, and in the Science of the Land camps, and the Arctic and Earth Science project, elders and scientists are key influentials in climate change work. And the stories and storytelling make climate science accessible, relevant, and actionable. And so this knowledge and this braiding is sought after by youth and by elders themselves, because they would like next generations to be carrying on the stories and the knowledge and the science that the elders have. Thank you.
perfect follow-up, right?
Intergenerational.
Exactly. We're trying to model that.
So Elena mentioned that the group made a dance to share their research with, and I'd encourage you to write to Elena and ask her for the video of the dance. In fact, if you have your computer and you can find it, maybe we'll share it, but we'll see. It's really wonderful to see that happening. So if you need to connect with Elena later and get that, maybe that would be a great idea, because that's wonderful. So to follow up on Elena's research, the next speaker is Katy Spellman. So let me close Elena's and bring up Katy's. Thanks.
I've been doing these conferences for about 30 years. One of these years, any moment now, they're actually going to have tech people in the room so that these presentations just flow.
They do, it's up.
I know, right? It's like, no. Thank you,
Great,
brother.
Mike.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So the theme of this talk is intergenerational storytelling, and my name is Katy Spellman, and I was born and raised in Alaska. My parents were immigrants from New Jersey, and I don't know the traditional greeting in New Jersey. But I think it's something like, hey, did you walk the dog and get your coffee yet? Or something like that, I don't know. But,
It's like, wow.
so when I was a little girl growing up in Fairbanks, Alaska, every Sunday I watched Elena Sparrow sing stories of praise to our Creator. And she helped me think that a little girl could become a scientist someday. So that is why I'm here right now. And maybe part of why Bonnie invited both of us, because multiple generations of trying to do science in a more equitable, just way in our world, and to empower youth to use science as a tool. And so in our project that Elena was talking about, using global learning and observations to benefit the environment, we started to get this real energy around storytelling. And we thought to ourselves, you know, when kids in Alaska start feeling like they're more part of this long-term study of our world, then maybe the science learning gains will be greater. And Dominique's like, duh, right? Okay. Of course, when you start getting kids involved in storytelling, that there would be learning benefits. So we set up a study to try to document that a little bit better and put it into a way that might convince people from many different backgrounds that adding storytelling to your science instruction, particularly in what we call citizen science or community-based monitoring, that this could be a benefit to all generations. So citizen science has a bad reputation for not being very inclusive. Even in the Arctic, if a recent study was done on 81 community-based monitoring programs in the Arctic, and only 5% included youth. So intergenerational, and one of them was Lena's project, and one of them was my project. And so even in the Arctic, where it's mostly indigenous observers, it's still an issue to get youth involved and women involved. 98% of the projects are dudes on ice. And so we wanted to see if storytelling could help that. Right, right, not the bad kind of ice, Kalani. So we took a subset of people from our project that were really interested in berries, and we wanted to ask, could a project that was focused on getting really good data about a community issue that people across Alaska were dealing with, and even as we learned, even in Hawaii, our fruit is changing, and that's a big deal because that's, as Christy says, that's our grocery store in Alaska. And so we have communities from all over Alaska involved in collecting data on berries, but we wanted to do community science in a way that might increase the benefits for kids. And so based on the learning and work we had done in our other project, we start with the knowledge and stories of community members and elders. And just like Elena said, this is the learning cycle model for those of you who are educators in the audience. We start by sharing stories about berries and how they're changing. And we then share the science question as a theatrical play, as a story. And then the kids share their own stories of how their own experiences, and we encourage them to use all their senses and everything that they see and feel and hear during their experience out doing science. And then we work to try to move their data into action using stories. And so we use this technique called scenario story development. So the kids take their data, they look at across the different sites, and they look at climate projections and imagine what their berries would look like if their climate was more similar to the climate that is projected for their community in the data. And they imagine that future if they do nothing. And they draw that picture. So you could see like the first one is the do nothing story, and the kids like, I don't know what's going on. There was one where the teacher was all crippled. They drew a picture of their teacher with missing teeth because they didn't get enough vitamins. And then they brainstorm ways that they could help shape the future that they want. And they retell the story using something that they've done to change the world. And they rewrite the story with their good berry future. And that has led to teachers actually taking action with their students and community members, tribal councils, doing something to change the future of their berries, of the kids imagining a better berry life. And then the teachers throwing their cane in the air, Kalani, and they're kicking up their heels, and they're like, we made our better world. And and then the final is sharing back with your own community or with other communities. And these are some students from Bethel, Alaska that we were working with that created their better berry future. And we have been evaluating the effect of this storytelling model compared to just students that go out and collect data and students who collect data but have worked with a scientist personally along the way. And the big thing that we're finding right now is when you include storytelling from elders to youth creating their own story of a better future, their science self-efficacy increases. And Dominique's probably like, well, duh, again. They feel like they're more a part of the science process. They feel more confident that they contribute. And ultimately, it's the same effect that I got when I was watching Elena rock out, sharing her stories of praise for our creator, that I could be a scientist someday too. So.
Nice.
So thank you, Katie. Thank you, Elena, as well. I didn't have the foresight to think of this, but we should have had Elena bring her guitar.
Yeah.
And I mentioned writing to Elena for the video of the dance. You might ask for some of the songs as well. Let's see, we have the soil song, the cloud songs. Yes. So again, recognizing the power of storytelling as we're learning. So thank you to both of you for that. I want to recognize also another element that Katie mentioned, which is connecting the scientist with the classrooms. And one of those scientists is in the audience. Thank you, Peter. He has done some work with connecting with students, and maybe when we have the dialogue time, you can say a little more about that, about how, as the scientists connect, and that's the part of the work I do on the project, as the scientists connect with the classrooms, we really emphasize, tell your story. Don't just report on the science that you're doing. Tell your story as well. And that is a powerful part of making a connection with the students. So yes, thank you, and we'll get to more of that later in a bit, maybe. All right, we're going to go on to Franklin Sage. I am so excited Franklin's here. Again, sometimes trouble getting here was just the norm for us. Oh, it's on the Mac. Yes, we're multi-platform as well. There we go. If you'll just open that. Oops, you got to double click it. Yeah. Right, so we're just going to display this of Franklin to give you some background. Ha, no pun intended. Come on.
You have to change it on the switcher. That's a matrix switcher, right? Thank you.
All right, see, I told you we had the tech guys in the room.
30 years in these conferences.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Franklin, come on up.
Yate, she could it in Slobit and Bashes chin, and the air that she she that she not. Anna shadow the guns nice or little the netato. Aro de ea, DJ ea, di hajine, nene being his hotishta. Eo hitch e dishtra. Greetings, my name is Frank Sage, and I just introduced myself with my 4 clans. It is a protocol and traditional that if you're Navajo, you introduce yourself in the 4 clans to identify yourself, who you are, who your relatives are, and you also identify yourself to the holy people. The holy people are the ones that we believe that created the Navajo. So one of the things I want to do, since everybody's telling their stories, I'm going to share a piece of my dissertation. In my dissertation, I just threw everything upside down with the Western paradigm. And I used a lot of my traditional stories in it and a lot of Navajo principles and values into my dissertation. And then instead of calling my dissertation chapters, I call it phase. So to stay within the 4 sacred direction, 4 sacred colors, I have 4 phases. So I'll just start begin. So I started right beginning, and it starts. In the beginning, according to the Net people, the world was dark, engulfed in mist, and a few flying little beings existed. They were known as Nilche, the Na, air people. In this world, the air people were asked to leave and to never return for their misconduct that upset other beings. The air people flew high up in the air until they could not go any higher. Voices directed them to fly towards the east, where a hole was located for them to fly into the second world. In the second world, there lived a swallow people, and the air people were welcome to live among them. For 24 days, the 2 groups enjoyed each other's company by learning from each other and started to form kinship between the groups. However, one of the air people misbehaved, so the group was expelled from the second world. As the air people flew around to find a way out of the second world, Nilche, wind, came out and directed them to the south. The air people emerged into the third world. In the third world lived the yellow grasshopper people. The air people were welcome to live among them. For 24 days, the 2 groups enjoyed each other's company and started to formulate kinship between the groups. One of the air people misbehaved again, so the group was expelled from the third world. They flew as high as they could in search of a way out of the third world. The voice from Nech'e, wind red, led them to the west. The air people emerged into the fourth world. In the fourth world, the 4 grasshoppers in the colors of white, blue, yellow, and black joined the people. This coming together resulted in 4 scouts being sent into 4 different directions to look for any other living beings and food sources. This is how the 4 directions of the east, south, west, and north came to be. The scouts that had gone to the west and east returned with no information. The South Scout came back with the reports of sights of 2 different footprints. Later to be found that these footprints tracks belonged to the deer and the turkey. The North Scout returned with information that he had seen beings that had their hair cut square in front and live on top of the houses. They were called Kisani. The following day, 2 Kisani arrived and invited the air people to their village. They accepted and followed the Kisani to the red stream that they had to cross on 4 different colors: white pine, blue spruce, yellow pine, and black spruce logs. In the village, they were fed corn and pumpkin, invited to stay and live among the Kisani people. For 24 days, the 2 groups enjoyed each other's company and started to formulate kinship between the groups. On the 24th night, the air spirit people had a council meeting where all agreed to maintain and value social norms. This meeting is how insects came to be in this current world. It did not take long for the holy people to appear and make their presence known to the newcomers. There were white bodies, talking God, blue bodies, water sprinklers, yellow bodies, known to the Navajo people as a black body, known to pages sticking together. Okay. Navajo people as black gods. They made sounds and gestures to the newcomers, but the groups could not understand each other. This attempt at communication repeated 4 times in 4 days. So you have all these different beings that came from all these different worlds in one part, and then you have the holy people and all the gods in one part. So the holy people and the gods are trying to talk to these beings, but they don't know, they don't understand. So it's like going to a foreign country and trying to speak English to a foreign, or they're trying to talk to you, or me trying to talk to you in Navajo. Doesn't know what's going on. So that's what's going on right here. On the 4th day and 4th time, blue bodies stayed behind and spoke to the air people and all insects in the language they could understand. The message was that the holy people wanted more people who were like them. The insects did not resemble what the holy people wanted. For the first time, the air people and all beings that came from the underworld were instructed to cleanse themselves for 12 days. So the holy people represent the human body, but their heads were pretty much like the Kachina dolls that you see everywhere. On the 12th day, the holy people returned with the buckskin, 2 ears of corn, yellow and white, 2 eagle feathers, white and yellow. They laid the buckskin on the ground and faced the head towards the east and the tail towards the west. The white corn was laid on a white eagle feather. The yellow corn was laid on the yellow eagle feather, and the buckskin was folded over it from the tail in. The east wind blew into the buckskin to provide air, give life. And when the buckskin was uncovered, there appeared 2 human beings, 1 male and 1 female. They were given the name Asa, first woman, and Astin, first man. The 2 humans had a family that became the today, and they again another social norm was violated that resulted in the 4th world flooding. The coyote took the water monster's baby and stealing became a taboo. The humans and insects were faced with another dilemma, which was to find a way out of the 4th world. Locust sacrificed himself to make a hole, but it was too small. So the badger was asked to dig a bigger hole, which would allow the rest of the bigger bodies being to pass through the 5th world. In the 5th world, the holy people, the first man and the first woman, created Navajo universe and instructed all beings to live according to their specific principles. One essential principle to the people is Sanayeo Bikao. Can't be translated to English. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Franklin. That was wonderful. I had the privilege of meeting Franklin, well, actually not in person, online, as we were working on a storytelling article. And your name was one of the first that came to mind when we decided to do this session on storytelling. So I look forward to digging even further into your dissertation as we go through the engagement part of this session. All right, so now we're going to turn it over to Bill again for the presentations of folks that couldn't be here, that we have some virtual elements to share with you. So, do you want to bring them? They're in my folder, right?
No.
You got them?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, because you got the on the back.
Yeah,
Icon.
got to be fast.
Gotta be an icon.
Mahalo bani. Okoi no Bill Thomas no Kaneohe Vau. Real simple. My name is Bill Thomas. I'm from Kaneohe on Oahu. And if any of you have been there, you know it's the rainy side. And my shirt is all of different pieces of water. meant to represent Kaneohe. And there's over 100 different names of rain. You know, the Ko'inui is the big rain we get almost every night, the orographic rainfall, and Ko'okea, the white rain that comes down the Ko'olaus, as you see it coming towards the house, you know, you got about 5 minutes before it's going to dump. You know, there are many stories about that. But, you know, before I get into all of this other stuff, is that, how did I get to Leslie? Is I went to a school, Kamehameha schools, and Kalani's a graduate as well. But when I was in 6th grade, we had this woman, Miss Curtis, who every Friday would come and tell us stories. And these are the stories that I was hoping Pu'akea would actually address, because it was these epic stories. The Kumulipu, our creation chant. Hi'iaka, the sister of Pele that created the islands. Kamapu'a, the pig. All of these things that actually defined our lives. And what Pu'akea was going to talk about was how these presented these frameworks for us in which our own individual practices, social, economic, environmental, were guided by these principles that came out of these epic stories, these tomes. And how important adaptation to place is. Dan, you talked about exactly about that. The stories that we tell, you know, the question we always ask is, when did we become Hawaiian? When did we become Maori? When did we become Samoan and anything else? We didn't get there and say, we're it. It's after adapting to that place. And it's through that adaptation that these stories that allowed us to live, to be resilient, to be sustainable, were created. And there's a lot of data within the qualitative information of those stories that reside within us. And that's what Pu'akea was going to talk about. And we'll show a short video, and then Kalani will be leading into that. You know, Dan had talked about his genealogy a bit. If I talked about mine, originally my grandmother's from the Big Island, Kohala, the north side of the Big Island. She came from a really big family, and my mom is one of 22 kids. So if I went through the genealogy, we wouldn't have time this week to do it. In addition to that, they're on every island. So that's why I like to keep it simple. Kaneohe, and I'm all wet. Now, Leslie, you know, Dr. Leslie, I can call her now.
Do we have confirmation? We don't know.
Leslie is great, so I have every confidence. So we're projecting onto it that she'll be Dr. Leslie. You know, I just wish that she were here, because I can't really do justice to her. She is just amazing. Jeff knows that very well as we do. But what you see here is, although we come from different places, we're all related some way, shape, or form. And a lot of that is we're united by the stories that we tell and the things that guide us in everyday life. And Leslie was going to talk about it from the point of navigation. That's what her dissertation was on. She was going to bring the navigation board, which is rare, and we were so excited, and I shouldn't have told you that, because now I'm letting you down. But what I'm going to do is going to tell you a short story about navigation. And you know, I was exchanging information with Leslie as well as, you know, and I'm going to talk about Haunani Kane, and I spoke with her a few weeks ago. And I wrote something late last night, so it's late. Anyway, Haunani, she was on the Malama Honua voyage, the worldwide voyage of the Hokulea. And one of the last legs before coming back to Hawaii was get to Rapa Nui. And Rapa Nui is a real tiny island. It's one of the hardest to get to find, just navigation and wayfinding, because it's an intertropical convergence zone, which means there's a lot of clouds, and it's hard to use the stars and everything to navigate by. And Nainoa Thompson, you know, the master navigator, was going to be the guy to guide them, but he had a family emergency. He couldn't go, so he said, hey, Haunani, you're it. You got to do this. You had thousands of hours of training. And I'm going to send Bruce Blankenfeld. Bruce is an amazing guy. He's a master navigator as well. Anyway, they're on this voyage, and it's cloudy, and they can't use the stars or anything. And she says, you know, Bruce, I'm not sure where we are. He goes, what does the Spirit tell you? And she goes, I don't know. I go, no. Calm down, quiet yourself. And, you know, everything's this, right? What does the Spirit tell you? And there's that moment where she recognized a lot of this stuff. And she said, I think we're too far south. We got to head back northeast. You know, and this is at night, clouds, so it's pretty dark. We get up in the morning, sun rising, and there's Rapa Nui. You know, and she understood at that moment that what it really means is, I'm going to read this off to you, because again, I wrote this late last night. I don't remember half what I said. And this is, you know, she and I were speaking at the SACNAS meeting a few weeks ago, and I said, you know, we have a lot in common. So what is our culture drives us to ask questions. You know, when we see a problem, we seek solutions because we know that it's important to our people. And when you think of science that way, you seek solutions knowing that there's an impact on people that you care about. And that's what we call, from our perspective, pono science. Pono means, it means, you know, what's right and righteous, but it also means balance. And it's bringing balance to our views and our perspectives, in that as Western-trained scientists as well as indigenous people, there's a way to bring balance to this dialogue, to come up with solutions. So indigenous knowledge, through the elements, if you're navigating out there, through the elements of the stars, the wind, ocean currents, allows for a deeper connection, a deeper understanding of that connectivity between the humans and the environment. In this space, you get a real different worldview that takes precedence, in which the tangible and the intangible objects come together to tell a story, a mo'olelo. You know, in indigenous knowledge, through the elements of reference to the stars, winds, and ocean currents, allows for that deeper understanding, that ike, that deep knowledge of that connectivity between you and the environment. And it's in this space where really a different worldview takes precedence over what you think is tangible. And when you're out in the ocean and you're a navigator, you know, you feel most connected. And we've all been there, at least oceanic people, we've all been there, that we feel connected to our ancestors, to our kupuna, when you're out there by yourself, you know, and there's nothing else around you. And if you're a navigator on the open ocean, you know, it's a space where you're using a lot of math, you know, a lot of science, a lot of critical thinking, observation, and recall. But it's more than that. You know, there's a spiritual and cultural element, like I just relayed. And at times, you know, things happen like this, and you can't really explain it because it's intuitive, it's reflexive, not reflective. I do this because I do it because it's what I'm supposed to do, right? You know, you start to step into that realm and realize that it's coming from somewhere deeper, and that you're making a connection back to your ancestors, a connection to that place that you're at that moment. And it's a connection that started with learning about the ocean by being in the ocean. You're learning about the mountains by being in the mountains. You know, and realizing that the classroom is not a set of walls, but it's a space where learning takes place, any space where learning takes place. And a large part of that space contains the stories our kupuna have told us, and those lessons that we learn. And that's the stuff that stays with us because it comes from a trusted and caring source, our kupuna, our teachers. Unlike, you know, the typical classroom where you don't really get that kind of feeling. So when you have that trusted source, they're impactful and reside within you for a lifetime. So when we mention the spiritual realm, the spiritual feeling that we get when we're seeking answers, it's all about those data points that reside within those stories that have become a part of us, so that we get to the point where that becomes reflexive, like I said, rather than reflective. We do what we do because that's what we're supposed to do. So to paraphrase Yoda, there is no why, there's only do. And that's sort of the lesson that Leslie wanted to talk about. Now, before we get into to Kalani and then the actual conversation, I just want a couple things about how we go about this. You know, before I converse, you know, it's two-way dialogue, so be respectful of one another. Everybody's voices counts, and everybody's voice needs to be heard. We hope no one tends to dominate that conversation. And we call it, in Hawaii, we call it kapu aloha, which means you intentionalize your thoughts. Do no harm to others. Everybody has their truth to speak. And it honors the energy and the life around aloha. Because the ultimate purpose of this is to share that and to share the meanings of our stories and what they mean to us. And I will now pass it on to Kalani.
You're not gonna roll
I will.
puakea. I think you can roll puakea on this thing, huh? Quick time.
Yes.
You know what they say, no two leaves, no two snowflakes. So why should any one rule apply to any more than one of us? I'm thinking, out loud, processing, getting you in the mood to start talking. Because, when we go to these conferences, we sit around, we drift between coffee and the occasional friend and cocktails at 7. I'm thinking if we went through all the trouble to actually get here, shouldn't we try to have a conversation, an honest one with each other about what we see out there, what we're dealing with, and where we think we can take this? Because some of us actually got policymakers' ears. We can actually go and, hey, this is what I heard. Hard to do if we don't hear nothing. Ayo? So move up, you guys, from the back of the room, because we're going to get into some wala'oing and talking story with each other, figure out where we're going with this thing. So we had a film from Puakea. You guys can hear me, right? My mother, she said, everybody hears you down the block, boy. Shut up. So just letting you know, this is how it rolls. Mahalo ioi to our cousins from Aotearoa. I am reminded that the British are celebrating 250 years of Captain Cook discovering New Zealand.
We weren't lost.
Yeah, I don't know what he would discover, So, you can play Puakea. It's quite amazing to me. Before we put Puakea on, I want to remark that there are people in New Zealand who do not celebrate that syphilis-spreading, invading idiot. That's not my opinion, that's theirs. I'm just saying that there's different stories. No two leaves, no two snowflakes. You following me? Right. So when we unpack this mess about who's discovering what, and we have this conversation, we're about to have it again. We have this conversation a lot. What happens is the dominant narrative, and you can translate that any way you want to. You notice I'm speaking in English because that's the dominant language. Not my first language, just the one I'm forced to speak in. So you're able to understand my thinking. So, when we unpack this who's discovering who, and we bring up these subjects, the dominant narrative tends to wait it out. You understand what I'm talking about? Anybody in the room with a vagina, raise your hand. Okay, you should clearly understand what I'm talking about. Whenever you bring up issues of non-parity, they just wait you out. So what do you got, a semester to go before you're out of our hair? Thanks, we'll just wait. And that's what happens all over the world for 1,000 years. Those in power wait us out. Why am I bringing this up? Because I'm telling you a story, I got an idea. When we get to the end of this, I'm going to tell you my ideas and invite you all to join in. Ayo? Right on. Anyway, this is my really good friend and Bill's really good friend, Puakea. He came up from San Francisco years ago, fell in love with the Hawaiian culture, became Hawaiian. Everybody in the world is Hawaiian. You guys just forgot. We're here to remind you. We are Kanaka Maori. And we're just part of the Hawaiian nation. And we're part of Oceania, and we're inviting you all to come join us again. Come join us again. There's a different world out there waiting. Ayo. Ayo.
Aloha. As any field of study benefits from the depth of its foundation, that's how we are finding materials here. I work with Hawaiian material, perfectly aware that
which brings me to the subject of our effort with NCAR. And I think we're in the 8th year now, and joined by NOAA and NASA, USGS, several, about 117 universities and the 34 tribal colleges. So it's kind of hefty, robust effort on the part of these folks to integrate this knowledge. My personal belief is that you don't integrate, you value all knowledge sets and you let the integration be the human being. It's just a personal perspective. I'm probably wrong. So anyway, when we were doing the National Climate Assessment, Auntie Raylene Kauai, who has since passed away, says to me, when you gonna stop telling the story? When you gonna be the story, boy? That was a couple of climate assessments ago. So those of you who don't know, I've been in a wheelchair and paralyzed for like the last 4 years. Only I walked up in this puppy. So things can change. You know what I mean? So what you do is you just stay at it. You don't give it up. You just hold to the stories and keep on going. That being said, those of you who have been watching Hawaii lately, especially from the science world, particularly astronomy, Hawaii's become an interesting location on a global scale, and it's impacting a lot of our partnerships. Now, Elena, Bonnie, quite a few of us all work together on that Globe Protocol project, so you're going to see some of that come up. What I decided to do was use the modern medium and what we have present to tell you a story, since that's supposed to be the point. Now, I can tell you about old berries or giant thunderbirds or whatever it is you want, but it's not going to be relevant. So I want it to be relevant about what we're doing, what we think we see, what we try to do. Now, this was put together by one of my students, and I'm going to narrate along. We have students, native students that we bring over. We teach to do live television, podcasts, and collect information on their iOS devices to share globally. If you didn't know, I'm the chairman of the Indigenous Phonology Network, along with Dr. Craig Elovich, who I conned into taking the second chair. And he's leading agroforester from Cornell. He's actually a systems design engineer. So, and we're working with Elena and the rest of the group and several around the country. We're doing mommy touring. You following me? Mommy touring. See, because I went to college too, so I know in my sophomore year I was out drinking and partying, and then I lied about the data and I sent it in anyway.
Oh, no.
So we're looking at like 45. If you ever wonder why our climate models look so sucky, it's 45 years of bad data. Right? I was the guy that did it, right, along with several other thousands, right? And we all know it. So why don't we pony up and do a Polaroid? Why don't we get out, take the money out of the big overhead programs, put it into community directly, do community science, get the money into the hands of mothers and households, have them monitor their high school students, use Globe Protocol and push ahead and take a 4-year snapshot of what's going on. It's never going below 400. Who are we kidding? Let's figure out what we need to do, AO? So anyway, here's the little report from my friend about what's going on. I'll try to do it justice. It begins with one of our great heroes, Bob Goff, from the National Center of Atmospheric Research, who died about a year ago. I want to let you know that Dick Radzinski just died 2 days ago, too. So they are solid warriors who are out there putting it all on the line for decades, and we're losing them. So I'd like to recognize those solid brothers and the work that they did. Double-click it.
The 4 questions that the UN asked the body of 3,000 scientists around the world: is climate change real? Is there a human fingerprint on it? Are there things we can do to mitigate the causes of climate change? And how do we adapt to those conditions that we can't mitigate? And those answers of the first 2 are purely scientific. I mean, where do you put the thermometer to get the global warming temperature of the entire globe? It's a lot of science involved, and we trust that the scientists have done that in peer-reviewed ways and have come up with good answers. So is there a human fingerprint on the pollution, on the causes of climate change? Yes, there is. The greenhouse gas emissions are piling up, causing the planet to warm. Are there things to mitigate? That gets very political because that involves vested interests of those in the production of greenhouse gas emissions. And a lot of denial took place in that realm. But the last question, physical scientists, climate scientists are asked about how will we adapt to it? What are the human behavioral strategies? And that's not their area. They've got nothing in that realm. But they came back to the UN and they said, you need to go home and talk to your local people and talk to your indigenous peoples to see how we can begin to adapt to a changing, very rapidly changing world.
This is the Rising Voices crew.
Of science in general. Our ancestors have been practicing science for thousands of years. The descendants that exist today wouldn't be here today if we weren't able to transfer that knowledge.
Some of these communities who have been living there for thousands of years before anyone else ever came, they were there learning how to live in this environment. And as it's changed over those centuries, they've continued to adapt to it. And so how have they done so? Why not turn to them for some of those answers?
They understand that part of the problems we've created in the world is this sort of misguided notion that there's one best way of doing things, that there's one answer to all problems. People don't want the best practices, they want the best practice. The miseducated dichotomy of the Western tradition where we think that there's some tension, some conflict between nature and culture is something that is completely foreign to indigenous thinking, to native thinkers. We understand that our cultures were emergent out of these symbiotic relationships. If we could reconnect the biological, the ecological diversity of the planet with the cultural diversity that we need so that we can live well in those places, I think we could address many of the most pressing problems we face on the planet today.
Yeah, so here's what we're trying to do about it with our students over time.
I'm Safe Nishida, and I'm working on the Includes project.
Where are we? Where are we?
4 years earlier.
We're at the Love Farm in
We've just been measuring out the area where we're going to put the gardens.
And we just finished installing the soil moisture probes. There's 4 different depths, so we can get the different readings at different depths of how much moisture is in the soil. We have 90s, we have 60, 30, and 10 centimeters. And then we're going to come check these regularly and see what the moisture in the soil is like.
So you see, we jump out in the community, which, by the way, I'm a community agitator. I marry them and bury them, we say back home. We get the kids out there planting trees. We go up and find the water sources. We find rivers diverted. They tell us it's a 14-year drought, but we find illegal diversions instead while we're trying to create food from the local farmers. That's the river. It's empty.
This here is a river, a conservation river, and it's protected by blue line in the federal government. And so, when we were looking for property, we stumbled across a waterhead that was never supposed to be running again.
Running now.
Unless you have a permit, until you have a permit.
So when we go to the policymakers, this is what they think about conservation.
The Supreme Court affirmed the issuance of the Conservation District Use Permit for the 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea.
Yesterday afternoon, DLNR issued the notice to proceed for the TMT civil construction package.
Some protection.
The Hawaii Supreme Court opinion that both the governor and Chair Case referenced followed a 4-year legal process.
Okay, so the intersection of indigenous knowledge and modern science is on Mauna Kea. We're up to like 700 arrests now. statewide. A lot of problems going on. You guys don't hear about them. They blanket the news and they stop you from hearing what's going on. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's going on. We get the military is nervous. We get that the U.S. is there illegally. Hey, there's a lot of problems going on, but why is it we got to take it on the chin all the time? Why we got to say aloha all the time? How come we're the ones that are supposed to welcome everybody in, no problem? While we all go and live in Vegas, because the U.S. Census Department says that the annual income for living in Hawaii is $93,000 on the low income scale. That means at $92,000 a year, I'm in poverty. I can't tell you the last time I made $92,000. But we're still working. This is what we do.
Raised on this island of Maui, near the cliffs of Hawaii. And my grandfather taught me a lesson when I was a child. You know, he said, there will be a time when the great holy
That means turnover.
these islands. And like the fingers, he says, the most important people on this earth will be the fisherman, the farmer, the hunter, the gatherer, and the medicine man. And he says, you look at the lima, all these fingers work together. If you put the lima down this way, you can always leave them whole, you can cover your seed, cover them up, you can pull up the crop. The only time you turn your head this way is to give to your family. So with that in mind, we're just waiting for the great holy to come.
I just wanted to reiterate that this is a 10 by 25 foot plot and that every single family dwelling in Honolulu could have something just like this. This little section has a lot of endemic plants. There's the la'i, the ava, the hau back there. It might look like chaos to the untrained eye, but this is actually a collaboration between humans and what naturally occurs in the forest. Wow, has it really been a year since we've been at this garden? Look how much has grown. The pigeon pea has exploded in this space, and this is the la'i that I showed you last time. It's almost as tall as I am. Welcome back to the garden.
Year 4.
Things have been growing everywhere. Here, everywhere. So we've added breadfruit. These are in pots. We're using it as a little nursery as the trees are getting ready to go in the ground. But we do have one that I'll show you in a bit that's in the ground here. Look how big the taro is. I think we're going to pull this one soon. And the ava is really shooting up now that there's more space. We took the pigeon pea out. Things are evolving. Our old friend, definitely taller than me now. Hey everybody, we're back at the garden, and we're here to see what time has done to it. The fourth
Intergenerational.
tall la'i. It's getting big. And back over here, my little aku is with me.
You got to start learning early. I was sent to my grandfather when I was 1. This student came to me from Boston 5.5 years ago before I got sick. I got sick, she moved in. I adopted her as my Hanai daughter. That's my grandson. I'm training him now. Intergenerational transfer of knowledge. It's not a cute slogan. It's an operational principle that we live with. Our grandparents raise our grandchildren. We don't send them to daycare. And we don't send the elderly to live in some little hospital for their golden years. You following me? We need to return to these base sets of values that we have as humans, as scientists. I'm sure we can see the strain on this closed loop system that we've been somehow degrading consistently for the last 2,000 years. So we're smart sea monkeys. We can figure this out. Let's write the new story. Ayo? Mahalo, you guys. Mahalo. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Kalani. All right. We have one last example to show you, and I'm not sure which computer it's on, so I'm going to move here. It's in my folder. Yeah. There it is. If you just, I'm sorry.
You know,
That
while
one right there.
she's struggling along, I want to invite you guys. I'm going to start a celebration on February 14th of 2020. I got some friends in Aotearoa, and now I'm going to have new friends. See, 8 years from now, Captain Cook comes to Hawaii and discovers Hawaii for the first time.
You guys are lost too.
Right, we were lost too. So 2 years after that, we kill him. So, starting next year on February 14th, Valentine's Day, we're going to take that day back from the churches, back from the commercial candy companies. We're going to call it the Relationship Day. We're going to talk about the death of the doctrine of discovery
Kia ora.
and the birth of the doctrine of relationship. And we're going to take 10 years to talk about this. They're not going to be able to dodge the bullet back there at the European banks, or way back there in Britain where they think they can just go around the world taking advantage of everybody. So my plan is starting next year, for 8 years, we're going to raise money to bring 100 of the best indigenous scientists, philosophers, economists, all the people that the British Empire abused over the years, together in Hawaii. And we're going to talk about rewriting the doctrine of relationship to replace the doctrine of discovery, the papal bulls, in the legal record. Let's think this through. I don't think they actually have the right to go around the world uninvited, chopping off people's hands and planting flags. That's just my opening discussion point. We have 8 years. We can discuss this leisurely. I'm sure the English crown is going to try and avoid this discussion, but I'm thinking in 10 years, we can hold our feet to the fire between Aotearoa and Hawaii. We can really begin to raise a question about who they think they are. Eo? So we're calling it the Great Hawaiian Captain Cooked Out. And we're going to celebrate by having it. It was going to be a cook-off, but we don't want it to be competitive. We figured we're just going to have families show up at Kealakekua Bay and just barbecue out and talk about how we're all related to each other. And really, this whole mess of discovering and dominance and colonialism, we got to put it all behind us and get on with being human beings. Ayo? I'm inviting you, February 14th. Look for it on Facebook.
Again, thank you, Kalani. The cooked out. We'll have to look into that. So the storytelling we've been talking about focuses a lot on that braiding. Several people have talked about braiding, that indigenous and Western Eurocentric kind of science. And so there's a project at NASA, an activity that I work on, and several of the other members, as you'll see from the pictures, are here in the audience. It's under a funding line called MUREP, which is for minority-serving institutions, of which tribal colleges are all in that category. And one of the things that the project does, is provides awards to those schools. And through one of the awards, a curriculum was created which incorporates many of the NASA climate change education pieces, along with indigenous storytelling. Get to the next slide. So that it is a curriculum that can be used both at the TCUs, in local high schools, or for a variety of purposes. So I'd like to show you, if I can you play that video now? It's under there somewhere. The video clip with the storytelling, and the speakers were supposed to be here. Yeah, no, it's a separate video. There we go. Thanks, Bill. And you'll be able to hear the storytelling that's a part of this curriculum. It's at the end. It's called Living Landscapes. Yeah, so at the end, the URL will be up there.
This place is our home, the home of the Salish, Ponderay, and Kootenai people for too many generations to count. I have grown up on this land like my Sile and his grandpa and his grandpa before that. My name is Alyssa Pretty on Top, and I live on the Flathead Indian Reservation. Each year we gather along the banks of the Flathead River for fall hunting camp. When we hunt deer and elk or harvest the bitter root for our feast, we are continuing our traditional way of life. It's hard to describe, but there is a softening influence of being in nature. These plants and animals are important because they have always been there for us, to nourish and to make our lives good. This year, my brother harvested his first deer. He told his story around the fire. We were all proud of him. My grandpa says we are the dreams and prayers of our ancestors, and that we have a responsibility to leave this world a better place. He thinks children today are like buffalo born behind the fence, with little awareness beyond their modern trappings. He says our ancestors knew the lines of the trails and curves of the hills as intimately as the lines and curves of their mothers' faces. We have to learn how to be in relationship with the earth again, and how our generation can protect it. We do it for our baby brothers and sisters, for our little cousins, and for everyone that we will love that hasn't been born yet. In the distance, I hear the constant coal trains rushing by, and I know there are many choices ahead of how to live on this earth. Sometimes it feels overwhelming, but I do believe we can hold on to our traditions. This dream isn't new. It's been lived from the beginning of time, and we've made it this far. Perhaps like my Yaya's beadwork, we can make a life that is strong and beautiful, one little step at a time, joining many little steps together.
So I'm going to pause it there for a second in case you'd like the URL. And as I said, it's part of a larger curriculum which was funded by this NASA award to incorporate and bring together the NASA science that's been done around climate change and the indigenous knowledge. The elder in the video tells many different stories throughout the curriculum about the changes that are happening and the knowledge that he bears. And most exciting to me, the grandson of that elder will be speaking at the Friday session at 4 p.m. He's a teenager. He's not even 21 yet, but he has traveled here to be able to speak about his grandfather's work and part of this curriculum. So yes, that's a shameless plug for the Friday session, but I'm so excited that he's coming as well. So I share that as a final piece to conclude this part of the session. And yeah, we don't have a whole hour left, imagine that. But we do want to talk more about how storytelling is being done, how science is being conveyed through storytelling. So maybe we can start with other examples that you'd like to share or with questions that you have for any of the panelists. It's really up to you at this point. If you'll come up to the mic here and ask your questions, that would be most helpful so everyone can hear them.
Just work out your Saturday night routine, you know.
Yep.
The 6-minute
So let's
day.
start. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, panelists. It's wonderful. I've worked some with Bonnie and with Elena. And I wanted to thank Dan for reminding me of a story, a true story. It happened to me about 20 years ago when Indigenous Knowledge saved my life. I was in American Samoa working on a project with the local government and the National Marine Fisheries Service. And at the end of the working time, some of the folks suggested that I take the little shuttle boat over to a small island that is on the east side of American Samoa. I'm almost embarrassed to say American Samoa. Why do we get to call it American Samoa? But that's, so this little island has a population then and now, I looked it up, of about 400 people. And I came in on the, I had been told to go to this Moon Cove because it's very beautiful. You probably know the place I'm talking about. And when I got off the boat, one of the locals said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going over to Moon Cove. And they said, oh, white man died there 2 weeks ago. So the sea grabbed him. You need to be careful. And so and I walked another 200 meters, and there was a woman who was hanging up her wash, and she said, hello, how are you? I said, I came to see your island and walk over to the cove. She said, oh, about 6 months ago, the sea grabbed a white man from the cliff. So be careful. And continued walking, and another a mile along, someone was stopped on their bicycle and said, welcome to the island. Where are you going? I said, I'm going to the Moon Cove. She said, oh, last year the sea grabbed a white man from the cliff there. So I was beginning to detect a trend. And so when I got to the cove, it looks east across the Pacific, and I'm not sure there's anything before you get to Hawaii from there. I'm an oceanographer by training, and so I do know something about frequency of waves and propagation of waves across long distances. So I was beginning to put things together. And so I did stand well back from the edge. About every 6 minutes, there's a really, really big wave that was generated 5,000 miles across, probably at Easter Island or something. It's come all the way across the Pacific Ocean to this little island. And it fills the entire cove. And, the top of the cliff is 100 feet above the water, right? Fills this one wave will fill the entire cove and, and cover the top. So, clearly, as Dan was saying, the local kids get raised from and I'm not sure how they phrase it, to the local kids. It may be a different story with them, but I'm here to tell the story because I listened.
And I think they purposely said white man 3
Absolutely.
times so you would hear, right? Because it would grab anybody, but
right.
they were looking at you.
Fast forward until about 5 years ago, we were planning a NASA field campaign in northern Canada and Alaska called the Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment. And while there was a group of us that were charged with writing the experiment plan for this that I was part of, and we have a data policy in that. And I had met, I'm sure Elena knows Carolina Behe, and I had some information from her about the Inuit Circumpolar Council and traditional knowledge. And so I wrote into the NASA data management plan section that explicitly recognizes and points to the kind of information that the Inuit Circumpolar Council has gathered on traditional and indigenous knowledge. I'm pretty sure that it is the first NASA project that has a data plan that explicitly recognizes traditional and indigenous knowledge. I could go on and on, and
Let's
I
hope
won't.
not
So
the last,
I will. You know, if Bonnie, if there's anything else you'd like me to say, because you know some of the things that.
Can you actually, I do have a question. Can you tell me the name of the group, because I can't think of it, that you refer to for protocols on data sovereignty, sovereignty of knowledge? There's a group, an acronym. I'm putting you on the spot, I know. You pointed me to it last AGU. and-
Preston guys,
Pardon me?
Preston and Kyle, them.
Yeah, the only thing that what I remember is the information that I got is off of the website for the Circle
Yeah, but
Court
there was
Council.
okay. I know there's a group called AOK that
Oh,
does some of that work.
Iloka.
Iloka,
Yes.
that's it. Thank you. I couldn't think of, all I could think of was the AOK, but see, that brought it out. Yeah, Iloka.
Yes.
So if any of you are looking for information on that data sovereignty, thank you for bringing that issue up. Iloka is a great source of information to inform those who need information on that. All right, thank you so much, Peter. Any questions for Peter?
A couple
Yes.
comments. There's Aunu. You're on Aunu Island.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they refer to that wave as.
Use Didier asked everybody to use the microphone because it's being recorded. So if you'll use your mic. When he left, he apologized. He had to leave early. He asked me to remind people to use the mic.
So Naluafi, I mean, the fire wave, or like the wave from the dragon.
Oh, okay.
They use that same terminology for the tsunami, but also, you know, as the tsunami wraps around the island, the waves come together and form this big Naluafi.
Yeah.
Right.
It's quite spectacular when you see.
His brother said Tanifa. You know, it's like same thing, right? Same principle. That dragon, that danger in the corner. You know, that wave. Mahalo, brother. You.
Peter, I'm glad you're here to tell about it. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, sort of related to Iloka, there's a new organization, the Global Indigenous Data Alliance, and they've recently released something called the CARE principles. So some of you may have heard of the FAIR principles, to make data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The CARE principles, so that's about the data. The CARE principles are about the people. And so the idea is to seize collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And so I think that's really powerful and really useful, especially since a lot of Western scientists are now beginning to realize the value of indigenous knowledge, and I think they're going in fairly naive. And so these CARE principles, I think, help provide a framework to get started. So it's something you might want to check out.
Kia ora, Mark.
Yes, Dominique. And while Dominique's walking up, I'll mention the project because we might want to look things up later. The project that Peter mentioned is actually called the Above mission. So if you Google NASA Above, you'll find more information on Peter's project. Hi, Dominique. Welcome.
I'm like Elena here.
Yeah. No, I think you can tilt it down.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Peter.
There's another session I'm running to, so I'll have to leave early. But Hahom, thank you for what I heard. It was so good. I'm glad you're here. I want to remind everyone and invite everyone to the Indigenous Science Networking reception that'll be this evening. You can look it up on the AGU website, so everyone's welcome to continue the conversation. I think the information is also online, or it's at the, I don't want to take too much time, I'll tell you in a minute. Yeah.
Nah, plug it, man.
We can.
The W, somebody knows.
I was going to
This
say, we
room.
have it. I know we do.
I wanted to mention, also contributed to the CARE principles. We have in the U.S. the U.S. Indigenous Data Sovereignty Network, usidsn.org. There's a Maori Sovereignty Network.
Yeah,
There's
Te Mana
also,
Raronga.
Aboriginal Network. They're popping up in colonized nations across the U.S.
We're going to use that phonology network is going to be coupled with songs of sovereignty. And if you hadn't sensed the theme, there's no getting around it here, you know.
And there's a young researcher from Native Nations Institute, Andrew Martinez, who's going to present a poster on that. So if you look up his name, his presentation would be a good place to learn more. I'll talk to Andrew. Also, if you want to learn more from Indigenous data sovereignty from one of our data warriors. So yeah, thank you, Hahon. Thank you for coming in to see all these pictures. See you soon.
Thank you. And Dominique, thank you for the research you have done, too. Dominique is a fairly recent PhD as well, so congratulations to you. Not as recent as as the one we mentioned today. Yeah, but pretty recent. So we made them a couple of flyers with some of the Indigenous sessions, and it does include the reception. It is tonight at 18:30 in the time of AGU that AGU is using, and it's at the Marriott Hotel on 3rd Street. Marriott. So I'll leave these here. Yeah, thanks, Kalani. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Jerry Ivanoff from Untitled, Alaska. I have a father that's 96 years old, and he told me a lot of stories. Our history is an oral tradition. It's not written down in any book. I graduated from Stanford University in 1986. Took me 15 years to get my degree, but I got it. And he told me when I got home that I'm no better than any people in here in Unalakleet. And I told him, Dad, with the knowledge that you have, you can speak Yupik from the people from Bristol Bay to Unalakleet, which is the line from between the Yupik and the Inupiat, and you can speak Inupiat with the people from Unalakleet to Barrow. And you taught me all the subsistence harvesting patterns. I'm a marine mammal scientist. I can take apart caribou. I can take apart moose. I take apart all the birds, waterfowl of all kinds. I take apart fish. I am a scientist. I am taught by my father through an oral tradition. And we have history documented by J. Lewis Giddings, an archaeologist that studied Cape Denby culture. We have a history of 12,000 years. So, you know, America discovered in 1776. Alaska discovered in 1800s. But we've been here for 12,000 years. And ours is an oral tradition. So storytelling and the passing of knowledge from the elders to the younger generation is a definite yes. We are scientists, and storytelling and the oral tradition has been passed on for generations, for 12,000 years. And I'm a hunter and a fisherman, and that's how I feed my family.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really wonderful. Yes, please come on up.
Hi, I'm Frank. I am a science communicator with NASA's Ames Research Center down here. So nice to see other NASA people also engaging in these conversations. The question I had is kind of touching on this question of, like, you know, exploration and discovery, which are words we use a lot when talking about space and exploring space. And, you know, a lot of the language we even use to talk about space exploration is deeply colonial. We even talk about colonies on Mars, you know, and that's sort of very deeply scary, because I think there's an argument that, oh, it's just like the language we're using, but I think that also is showing the mindset of how we're approaching these things and the stories that we tell about space exploration. So something that's very important to me personally, and, you know, to some degree also professionally, my job is talking about space and how we explore it. So I wanted to ask all of you, how can we tell stories about how we explore, how we, you know, interact with space? I don't even, explore is also even in itself, you know,
There's amazing breadth and depth of stories regarding interaction with people beyond the moon in our culture. I mean, it's long-standing. We can tell you all kinds of things about the people beyond the moon. Its relevancy is the thing that gets called into question. When children are not being fed, right? And we're seeing what we're seeing in our close social order. Does it require us to look at light that's 13.5 billion light years old? I get that that's a nice piece of information, but is it relevant when we need non-point source pollution control? We need to figure out different ways to handle solid waste management. We got to recover hydrocarbons from the polymers in the world. There's a lot of serious stuff going on. Thanks, I get it. The billionaires want to put their name on a telescope that looks 13.5 billion light years away. We're saying, no.
I guess.
Right, so it's relevancy to your science. Now, if the children, I gotta preface it by saying this. In our culture, I was tasked with 3 jobs by my grandfather. The first one was feed the children. The second one, and by the way, feeding the children is a difficult thing. I mean, first of all, you're saying that coupling is happening, that there is no war. And how many of you have tried to feed a child? Right, so if you look away for a second, there's a spoon in an ear and somebody's cleaning up something. And yeah, it requires concentration. It needs resource. You gotta have shelter, infrastructure. Feeding children is not an easy thing. And by the way, they don't eat just food. So, second task, are the old people comfortable? So making sure that the old people are not getting by, that they're comfortable. So we're planning for diminishing capacity as we look infrastructure-wise, operationally, design-wise. A culture that does that is a culture that values wisdom over knowledge and data. And that's quite a different thing. And I think that, again, addresses what we're talking about. Third thing, my grandfather said, are the women unafraid? When you look in their eyes, what do you see, boy? If the women are afraid, what are the men doing? Right? And it's really simple. So those are the 3 things that drive me in my life. That being the case, I'll apply science, art, music, dance, anything to make those things happen. So science, definite yes. I was a huge astronomy fan. We're still discussing whether it's plasmatic or gravitationally evolved. You know what I mean? If we talk about it, was Saturn a brown dwarf? Did Sol leech off the energy? Are the small rocky planets originally the planets that were around that star? How come we're the only solar system that has the small rocky planets on the interior, inside the gas giants? There's a lot of questions to answer. How about this one? What are we going to do about the near shore pollution? What are we going to do about the plastics in the ocean? What are we going to do about the food collapse that's going to happen in 18 months in North America? Because we've had five Arctic snap events. It's not December 22nd, and those a-holes keep telling us there's no such thing as climate change. Get real. Take the billions of dollars. Let's spend them on our children. I'm probably wrong, just my opinion.
Bill wasn't kidding when he said Kalani could be 5 hours.
Sorry, sorry. I'm just saying we need to talk about it in a real way.
We
right?
do.
In a real way.
Yes, and I think that's actually the root of your question. Yeah, you wanted to ask a question back?
Well, yeah, I guess just to...
No, I mean, nothing personal, you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
It's
no,
like I'm
totally.
thinking about, I want to respond to your question.
That's why I wanted to go back, yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a conversation I've been thinking about a lot. You know, it's like, a part of me feels like, as you're saying, the billionaires are going to space, and that's their response to climate change is, how do we, which is a narrative that a lot of people buy into. So how do we tell stories about how we engage with space and, interacting with these new environments that doesn't replicate
so.
those
I mean,
systems?
space exploration has given us most of the treasures that we find from the technological world. But you can see that as artificial intelligence advances, we're going to become obsolete. I mean, anybody who's really doing the science, crunching the numbers, you can see it coming, right? What are we going to give it? 75 years? 100 years? I don't care what we give it. I think in 500-year blocks. So I see it as imminent. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I mean, real
I'm
conversation
wondering
about
if-
where we'll spend the money.
I'm wondering if others on the panel want to comment on that. And Franklin, I know you're our academic member of the panel coming from Diné College. So if you have some thoughts from your dissertation on that, we'll come back to you too. Katie?
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, Frank, I don't know if you've been kind of, Kalani's modeling his approach, and humility is...
Not one of them?
No, it's one of them, because I don't know if you noticed, like, every time Kalani's talking, he's saying, I might be wrong.
Yeah.
At the end, and I think that is a real challenge for NASA, because you guys have some star power, and just like to accept with humility the discovery process, and like discover I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Which is what you're modeling,
I
Kalani.
think that science is that, right? The discovery moment is intuitive. And then we do repetition to try and prove some kind of, I don't know, quantitative ratio. I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know what I
Dan,
mean?
did you have a comment
Yeah.
as well?
A whakaaro from some elders back home that I teach my science students is you get taught that you are the discoverer, that the agency lies with you. In a Māori worldview, you need to align your thinking and get yourself ready, and we do it through incantation and karakia. And then the knowledge is all out there, and when you're ready and prepared, it will reveal itself to you. So maybe if you frame some of it about that way, it's not about exploration or discovery. That will happen, but you put yourself in the right frame and everything is revealed. Who suddenly found their wallet when they've been hunting and hunting? They weren't quite in that right frame of mind. And so it's more about taking you as the individual, not the agent of discovery. How can you just, it's already there. We're not Captain Cook.
Right, right.
You know, it's already there. You just got to align yourself, attune yourself. Te whakaaro.
Franklin, did you want to add something to that?
I think one of the unique things about the nation and Diné College is that Diné College is rooted in Navajo philosophy, Navajo language, Navajo culture, Navajo epistemology, Navajo ontology. And it is also located in the heart of the Navajo Nation. But one of the things about also teaching science at Diné College, that some of the faculties and some of the traditional, we actually have traditional healers, practitioners, teaching courses at Diné College. And they're teaching under Diné Studies. So a lot of them teach in the Navajo language. And to your questions, and there's actually, right now, it's winter. So this is a perfect time to use a lot of winter stories, because there's a story, I don't think we have time for me to talk about it, but there's a story where the coyote was looking at the first man and the first woman. First man and first woman were tasked to put stars in the sky. So they were being very careful in how they place them. That's how you get your North Star, your Big Dipper, and all this stuff, right? So the coyote was watching them work and do all this stuff, and he got impatient. So most people consider the coyote as more of a troublemaker or just a mischief. But we see him as more of a philosopher and someone that actually helps you dig deeper into a lot of different things as far as philosophy goes. But anyway, when he was doing that, the first man and first woman were working on the stars. So one of the things when they took a break, so the coyote went over to where the blankets for all the stars is. So he says, let me help you guys. So he started putting the smaller ones. He told him, just put the small ones first. So he started doing it. It's taking too long. He was impatient. So he went back down and grabbed the blanket and just like that. So he threw all the stars in the skies, and that's how we got the stars in the skies the way it is now. So that's one of the ways that a lot of faculties are teaching this very simple, basic stories in science classes, in which, it is your interpretation, how you interpret the story, and how how does it affect you personally. So.
And I think that the cultural relevance to the stories in general is something that we also, I will refer you to Caroline. I'm not going to put you on the spot to talk, and in the essence of time, we won't handle this question any longer, I don't think. But I think we could follow up with you later, too, because Caroline's role on the Main Sea team is communications strategist. And that's a big part of what we're working on. Great question. Yeah, great question. Yeah. So Frank, right?
Yes,
I think
Frank.
I see. Yes, thank you, Frank. Yes,
Yeah.
please don't leave without connecting with Caroline.
No, it definitely won't.
Yeah.
And thank you all for your very thoughtful responses.
Thank you for your question. Thanks. Go ahead. Yep.
So I'm Christy Buffington at the International Arctic Research Center. I work with Elena. Dr. Sage, I have a follow-up question for you. I used to live and work on the Flathead Reservation, so thanks, Bonnie, for that beautiful video. And I learned with the coyote story that, first of all, I could never tell the story. In that community, I was told that I could not tell the story because I was non-native. And then it had to be told at a certain month and a certain time, and also we were facing east in the mountains, and the mountains had to have the right amount of snow on them. So I struggled a little bit with trying to figure out how, as a scientist, to use stories when I wasn't allowed to be the storyteller and relate someone else's story. So what advice do you have as panelists for scientists who want to incorporate story, but maybe aren't the right voice?
Thanks for the question. I think a lot of times you might have to ask an elder to tell a story in your class, depending if you're in Montana, right? That's where you're at?
I'm in Alaska now.
Yeah, Alaska now. Yeah, so if you want to incorporate certain local stories, you're going to have to talk to the elders. So a lot of these stories are, some are personal stories, some are community stories, some are family stories, some are community stories, some are ceremonial stories, and those are not to be repeated only in certain ceremony areas. So you have to be very cognizant of these stories. These stories are not entertainment stories. They're actually there to teach a lesson, because if you look at it, before contact, for me, contact was before the Europeans came to our land. We had our own system of education, and one of the ways we did was through storytelling. So that was one of our first institutional, I guess, education. And so you just have to talk to an elder.
Great, thank you.
I got one example from Hawaii too, where you can do this, is that what we've done in the past was that we've paired a scientist with a traditional practitioner, mostly kumuhula, and they've gone through stories, chant songs, and dances, and they'll say the words of the chant, and then the scientist will say, you know, what you're describing is El Nino Southern Oscillation. When you look at, you know, Pu'ukapole, certain time of the year when the sun is setting over that, you know, we know that the Makahiki is going to begin the new year. And it's having those two together that it brings credence, but also brings different audiences together. You know, and that's a thing where that not only the networking begins, but the understanding begins.
And maybe just a quick follow-up. Just trust. I've worked with communities, and you just have an open and honest, trusting relationship with them, and they've given me permission to use some of their stories and some of my scientific research outputs, because we start at the very outset. You know, this is what some of the outputs might look like, and there's often layers to those stories. So they'll give me the very basic. This, everyone knows this. We don't lose anything with you telling that story, and it's about acknowledgement. It was interesting. I was sharing with my colleagues. I wrote a paper, and I put all of the elders' names on the paper, and I got, boy, get our names off. Oh, yes, Matua, yes, elder. I'm not trying to get your name back on, but how come you don't want your name here? And they said, oh, because your independence from us gives the work you do more power. And it broke my heart for them to say that, but I understood there, and I said, we have this thing called the acknowledgements. That's where our name should go, boy. But because of those types of things, that community trusts, you know, the way we approach things, and so if we ask them in the future, so yeah.
And just to add to that, when I first came to Alaska, and I thought I was going to be working with communities, I thought very naively that once I worked with one community, then it's the same with the all. But there are 229 tribes in Alaska. And so each group, we have to ask and establish that trusting relationship. So it takes time and to establish that. And so, you know, now I know and understand that we have to ask permission and find out what are the elders.
And at every step.
Yes, in every step.
And the power lies with the community.
Right.
Yeah.
They say no, we stop.
Yeah.
Don't show up with empty hands.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do that.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you to everyone. Go ahead.
Thanks for your patience.
Yes, great question, great answers. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Aramati Casper. I'm a research associate at Colorado State University. And I actually am here in part by way of Dominique, because I went to her defense, heard about Rising Voices, sent an email that said, I know it's like next week, but can I still show up? And so I was there, and now I'm here and know about this from the Rising Voices listserv. So thank you, all of you, and also to Dominique, that I ended up here in this room. The research project that I'm on right now is focused on creating change in your standard everyday classroom, because we know we need to do work and support people who are in marginalized communities, but we're not going to create change unless we're creating change in the dominant society. And so I'm an ecologist and education social scientist, but I'm in engineering right now. And one of the privileges I have is I'm writing curriculum and I'm publishing curriculum. And part of that is using case study, which is really using story and bringing the socially situated nature of science and engineering into the classrooms. And I need people who I can work with to tell more stories so I can write more curriculum. So, because they're the stories that can be told and can be used both in kind of story because of other things, I'm going to use like a big S story. And then there's just kind of the everyday stories that have a poster on the Friday morning poster session where we tell the story of the settlement of New Orleans and how the problems with that led to really problematic disproportional impact on Black communities and other communities. The cool thing that I'll give you the amazing punchline from that is, so in a group of first-year engineering students who the thing is, no, you can't bring this in, they don't want it, over 50% of them specifically wrote about how they learned and thought it was important. They were learning about the social context of engineering and connecting social to engineering. And so if you have ideas, if you're willing to work with me and help me be able to write more of this, because we have lots of classes we can put this into, and we're also working on publishing the curriculum in case studies in the environment for things we can fit there. I would love to work with you in any way, and also if there are ways that I can help you, I want to put that out there. I don't want to just simply ask, give me things, but also I'm a research associate, I don't have a full-time position, and I try to see that as a powerful place of I have time. So please see me afterwards, and also if anybody would like to speak to that as well, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, we were just at Colorado State. We got given the boot, or rather, CU stole our program from Colorado State. So now we're down at CU with Brian Miller, and pay attention to Phonology Fridays. We're going to begin this next year, where instead of a monthly National Phonology Network and Indigenous Phonology Network meeting call, we're going to start podcasting with input from the regions live, like once a week on Friday. So we're going to try to do a live podcast called Phonology Fridays, starting the beginning of the year, 2 hours, with all of our tribal colleges giving input by iOS device into this network that will broadcast across for everybody. And we're hoping to share it internationally too, to get more input, changes we see. So students will be able to video or take a video with their phone, their iOS device, of the phenomena, send it in to us as a file, and then on the day of the broadcast, come in with their iOS device like a reporter and talk about the phenomena they're seeing or the change, share it with everybody else and get input and an exchange about what we think we're seeing regionally. Sorry to take up airtime, but
Yeah.
Watch for that, because that's a great way for you to join in. All the stories are shared in the network.
Good stuff. And I just want you to know, I do recognize we're a few minutes over. If you need to leave, I understand, but I do want to let the panelists respond to that question, if that's okay. Dan, did you want to?
Yeah, I had a...
Yeah, go ahead.
So we've been working with Māori and Pacifica students in New Zealand around science and trying to turn them onto science. And we've been using Maui. Maui as the someone, not the island.
Yeah,
Maui who pushed boundaries. Maui who didn't accept the status quo. Maui who was cast aside by society, so was able to respectfully kind of probe these boundaries. And we've demonstrated through some of the pūrākau, some of the Maui stories, that those are explanations for phenomena in the world we see around us. Yeah. And so once we've got the students recognising that, and then we say to them, well, you're Māori or Pacifica or Polynesian, and Maui is in your whakapapa, Maui is in your ancestry, and if Maui was a scientist, then you're a scientist. And in fact, your ancestors navigated around the Pacific. Jared Diamond calls it the single greatest feat of humankind to date, including, the works of NASA. And so suddenly science isn't extrinsic. Science isn't a piece of paper saying that you've got a degree in science. Science is within you. Science is who you are. And so then you don't need permission to be a scientist. You just need to find it within you and let it come out. And so that's the work we're doing in Aotearoa.
Very powerful. That was great. Anything else from the panel?
I was just thinking, when we're talking about curriculum development, at the beginning of my career, I really liked to crank out lessons, and then we started to realize that maybe those lessons were reaching the kids like me because I wrote them. And so we've really moved, and Elena mentioned this in her talk, we've really moved toward a different model for writing curriculum. And it's and it's really, and it's slower, and you're not gonna get as much cranked out. But it's a better process and a better product, and better, we think it will be better learning for the kids. And there's a bunch of other projects that are demonstrating that it's better for the kids. And it's a partnership where you're in the room together. It's not just Katy. I get really excited, and I'm like, wouldn't this be a great lesson plan? I'm going to write it up real fast, and I'm going to publish it, and I'm going to pilot it, and do it all, and I'm going to ask people for advice. But this process, we're working with our interior Indigenous educators, has been much better approach, and we sit in the same room together and we write it together. So just wanted to put that out there as an alternative way to develop better lessons for kids of all types that don't just look like you.
See, now smart people, right? And smart people, they learn from their mistakes, but wise people, they learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, I made that mistake.
Right, so wisdom abounds, you know what I mean? It's like, ouch.
Great, yeah.
We're the IPN, we'll partner with you.
Yeah. In the same room at the same time.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of those comments. Elena?
Just one last one. It's using the needs of the audiences we want to reach is what should drive our curriculum, our work, whatever we do.
Right, and actually, I'm going to share the one word that continues to pulse through my mind here because I think it relates to Frank's question and the curriculum, and that is resonance. The resonance is what is the necessary part. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and Dan is going to close us out, right? Thank you, and thank you for all of you who stayed. Thanks.
So as Kalani opened for us, my colleagues from Aotearoa, New Zealand are going to close us off. I think Sylvia and Kelvin stepping up.
Kia ora tātai. Hoi anora nā mihi anō kia koe i te rangatira, te kano hikitea o tēnei whenua, a nā mihi anō kia koe i nā kai whakarite i nā āhuatana o tō tātai hui. Just like to acknowledge our First Nations here. Thank you very much for having us here on your whenua. Our secret feet, our waiwai, the undersoles of our feet, touch your land. We were just with the Dene people 3 weeks ago, and I'd just like to acknowledge you with that. I'm going to give you this little thing over here. It's a pūrere hua. We use it for drought, and people talk about different stories, and it's for children. And if we feed children, we can grow things 100 years plus. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to my wife. She's going to do our incantation karakia.
Kia ora tātai. This was actually written a few months ago. It's a responsive prayer to our whānau of Mauna Kea and the struggles that you've been going through. So we are talking now on a metaphysical level of science, and so we send this to you. So. E hine, ka rongo manawa pa mamai e pupu, pū, e puta wai rua oha e ara, e ara uri hono e re te mahana ahi e. Whakaokia te mauri runa te tika te pono me te aroha tukua.
Tēnā koe.